The Sea Dart missile systems, sophisticated weapons that have proven devastatingly effective against Argentine aircraft throughout this conflict, begin their mechanical rotation, their targeting computers humming to life as they search for the incoming threats. On the sister ship HMS Broadsword, a similar scene unfolds. Captain James Mitchell receives the alert and immediately orders his crew to battle stations. The Seawolf missile system, shorter-ranged but more agile than the darts, begins its own search pattern. Both ships are now locked in a deadly dance, with 4 aircraft they cannot yet see. Commander Castellano and his formation are now at the critical juncture. They can see Pebble Island ahead, that rocky outcropping that represents their only chance at survival. Isla de Bourbon ahead, Castellano transmits, using the Spanish name for the island. Maintain formation. Follow my lead precisely. Any deviation and we're exposed. The pilots acknowledge, their voices tight with concentration. They're now flying at an altitude so low that the landing gear could almost touch the water. The engines of their A4 Skyhawks are screaming, pushed to their absolute limits, every rivet and bolt of these aging aircraft vibrating with the strain. As they approach Pebble Island, something miraculous happens from the Argentine perspective, something that represents the culmination of months of planning and desperate hope. The radar contacts on both British ships simply vanish. One moment they're there, 4 clear blips on the screen, and the next moment, nothing. The radar operators aboard Coventry exchange confused glances. "Contacts lost over Pebble Island," one of them reports, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty. Captain Richardson feels a chill run down his spine. He knows what this means. The Argentinians have found the radar shadow, the blind spot that every experienced naval officer knows exists but hopes will never be exploited. Richardson makes a decision that will haunt him for the rest of his life. He orders the Sea Dart missiles to stand down, to cease their active search. It's a tactical decision based on sound reasoning. If he can't see the targets, he can't lock onto them, and firing blindly is a waste of precious ordnance. But it's also a decision that removes his primary defense at the exact moment when it's needed most. He reaches for the radio to contact Broadsword. "Broadsword, this is Coventry. We've lost the contacts. They're using the island as cover. Maintain yellow alert and prepare for close-range engagement." Aboard Broadsword, Captain Mitchell acknowledges the transmission. His Seawolf system is designed for exactly this scenario, close-range engagements where targets appear suddenly and must be engaged with speed and precision. But Mitchell knows that the Seawolf system has limitations. It's designed to track individual aircraft, not multiple targets in rapid succession. If the Argentinians come in as a coordinated formation, the system might struggle to prioritize and engage effectively. Meanwhile, Commander Castellano is orchestrating his attack with the precision of a conductor leading a symphony. He's brought his formation as close to the British ships as he dares, while still maintaining cover from Pebble Island. His aircraft have no radar, no sophisticated warning systems, no electronic countermeasures, nothing but the skill of his pilots and the element of surprise. But at 10 nautical miles distance, something extraordinary happens. Through the haze and spray, the pilots can see the British ships. They're right there, massive steel hulls cutting through the water, their superstructures bristling with weapon systems. "Starting the attack!" Castellano's voice rings out across the radio, and immediately his wingman, Lieutenant Marcus Delgado, responds with a shout of encouragement. "Good luck, Commander. May fortune favor the bold." The 2 lead aircraft accelerate to maximum speed, their engines producing a roar that can be heard for miles across the open ocean. They're now committed. There's no turning back, no abort option, no second chances. They're going to attack, and they're going to do it with everything they have. The moment the Skyhawks light up their radar systems to begin their attack run, the British radar operators see them instantly. 2 hostiles bearing 192, low level. The operator aboard Coventry shouts. But at that exact moment, something else appears on the radar screen. A British Harrier jump jet, one of their own aircraft, is in the vicinity, having been conducting patrol operations in the area. Captain Richardson faces an impossible decision. He has two targets on his radar, but one of them is his own aircraft. If he fires the Sea Dart missiles, he risks hitting the Harrier. If he doesn't fire, the Argentine aircraft will reach his ship. "Captain, friendly aircraft 20 miles out," the tactical officer reports, his voice steady but carrying the weight of the situation. Richardson's mind races through the calculations. The Harrier is fast, but it's also in the general direction of the incoming Argentine aircraft. The margin for error is virtually non-existent, but Richardson has spent his entire career making impossible decisions, and he makes one now. "Turn the Harrier away! Shoot missiles!" he commands, his voice carrying the absolute authority of a man who knows that hesitation means death. The Sea Dart operators work frantically to acquire a lock on the incoming aircraft, but the Argentinians are flying so low, so incredibly close to the surface of the ocean, that the radar is having difficulty maintaining a stable track. The aircraft are essentially skimming the waves, their canopies covered in sea salt spray, their silhouettes merging with the radar clutter created by the ocean surface itself. The operators struggle to separate the signal of the aircraft from the background noise of the sea. This is the kind of moment that separates legendary pilots from the rest. If you've ever studied military aviation history, you know that these split-second decisions determine the outcome of entire battles. What's your take? Should Richardson have fired, or was he right to hold back? Let me know in the comments. Commander Castellano sees the traces of anti-aircraft fire beginning to light up the sky around him. The British are firing, but they're firing at the wrong altitude, their guns elevated too high. Their calculations based on the assumption that aircraft would be flying at a more conventional altitude. The shells are passing above and around the Argentine formation, creating a deadly but ultimately ineffective barrage. Castellano can see the splashes where the shells are hitting the water, can see the tracers drawing closer as the British gunners adjust their aim and refine their calculations. Castellano's canopy is indeed covered in sea salt, the spray from the ocean coating his windscreen, making visibility difficult. But he's flown this aircraft hundreds of times, and he knows it like he knows his own body. He can feel the aircraft responding to his inputs, can sense the subtle vibrations that tell him everything about the machine's performance. He's so low now that he can see individual waves, can see the texture of the ocean's surface. The dread he felt moments ago has transformed into something else, a crystalline focus, a clarity that comes only in moments of absolute danger. Behind him, Lieutenant Delgado is matching his every move, staying in formation, maintaining the precise spacing that allows them to present a coordinated attack. The two aircraft are now less than 5 nautical miles from the British ships, and the intensity of the anti-aircraft fire is increasing exponentially. The British are throwing everything they have at the incoming aircraft, machine guns, cannons, everything. The sky around the Argentine formation is becoming a hellscape of tracers and explosions. Aboard HMS Coventry, Captain Richardson can see the enemy aircraft now with his naked eye. They're coming in fast, incredibly fast, their silhouettes growing larger with each passing second. The Sea Dart missiles are still struggling to acquire a lock, the radar operators calling out range and bearing updates, but the lock simply won't hold. The aircraft are too low, too fast, too maneuverable. Richardson feels a sense of dread settling over him, a premonition that something terrible is about to happen. Aboard HMS Broadsword, Captain Mitchell is watching the same scene unfold. His Seawolf system is active. The operators are searching for a lock, but they're facing the same problem as the Coventry. The aircraft are simply too low, too fast, too difficult to track with conventional radar systems. Mitchell knows that his ship's only real defense now is the close-in weapon system, the phalanx CIWS, and the small arms fire from his crew. It's not much, but it's all he has. Castellano makes a tactical decision that will echo through military history. He sees the intensity of the fire coming from the Coventry, sees that the British are concentrating their defensive efforts on his formation. He makes a split-second call to change targets. "Change to the other one," he shouts into the radio. "We're switching to broadsword. Follow me." The two aircraft bank sharply, their wings nearly vertical as they execute a maneuver that would be impossible at higher altitudes, but is manageable at their current speed and altitude. The two Skyhawks pull away from the Coventry's defensive fire and line up their approach to HMS Broadsword. The British sailors aboard Broadsword see the aircraft coming toward them, see the moment when Castellano and Delgado arm their weapons systems. The pilots are now committed to their attack run. There's no abort, no escape, no way out. They're going to release their ordnance, and they're going to do it at point-blank range. Castellano pulls the trigger on his aircraft's 20mm cannons, and a stream of rounds begins to pour out, stitching a line of impacts across the water and toward the British ship. Delgado does the same, his cannons adding to the volume of fire. The two aircraft are now so close to the broadsword that the British sailors can see the pilots in their cockpits, can see the determination on their faces. It's a moment of absolute clarity, a moment where the abstractions of war become brutally, viscerally real. Then Castellano releases his payload. Two 1,000-pound bombs fall away from his aircraft, their trajectory carrying them toward the British ship. They're not guided weapons, not precision munitions. They're simple gravity bombs, falling through the air toward their target. But Castellano has timed the release perfectly, and the bombs are heading directly toward the broadsword's hull. The bombs hit the water first, their massive weight creating enormous splashes as they strike the ocean surface. But something extraordinary happens in that moment. The bombs don't sink. Instead, they skip. Like stones thrown across a pond by a child, the bombs bounce off the water's surface, their trajectory redirecting them upward. The British sailors aboard Broadsword watch in a mixture of horror and disbelief as the two massive projectiles skip across the water toward them, bouncing twice before reaching the ship's hull. The first bomb hits the water short of the ship and sinks harmlessly into the depths. But the second bomb doesn't miss. It strikes the broadsword's hull with a tremendous impact, the force of the collision sending a shockwave through the entire vessel. The bomb punches through the outer hull, its momentum carrying it deep into the ship's interior. But then something miraculous happens. The bomb is deflected by the ship's internal structure, its trajectory altered by the angle of impact. Instead of detonating inside the ship, it's redirected upward, punching back out through the deck and tumbling into the air. The British sailors watch in stunned amazement as the bomb, still intact, still unexploded, arcs through the air above their ship and splashes into the ocean on the other side. It's a moment of extraordinary luck, a moment where the laws of probability seem to have intervened on behalf of the British. The bomb should have detonated. By all rights, it should have torn a massive hole in the broadsword's hull, should have killed dozens of sailors, should have crippled or sunk the ship. But it didn't. Castellano sees the bomb skip across the water and watches as it fails to detonate. He's dismayed, frustrated, but he knows that the attack isn't over. Behind his formation, two more aircraft are approaching. First Lieutenant Adrian Morales and Ensign Thomas Brennan, flying their own A4 Skyhawks, carrying their own ordnance. These aircraft are equipped with smaller 250-kilogram bombs, but these weapons are more reliable, more likely to detonate on impact. Morales and Brennan are the follow-up strike, the second wave designed to finish what Castellano and Delgado have started. Aboard HMS Coventry, Captain Richardson has regained his composure after the initial shock of the attack. He's now seeing all four Argentine aircraft on his radar, and he makes a decision that he believes will give him the best chance of defending his ship. He orders an immediate turn to starboard, a maneuver designed to allow his Sea Dart missile system to engage all 4 contacts simultaneously. The Coventry's massive hull begins to turn, the ship responding to the helm with the ponderous grace of a vessel displacing thousands of tons of water. The Sea Dart operators aboard Coventry acquire a lock on Morales' aircraft. The targeting computer has finally found a stable track, and the operators are confident in their solution. "Shoot!" Captain Richardson commands, and the Sea Dart missile system springs to life. There's a bright flash on the Coventry's deck as the missile ignites, its rocket motor producing a tremendous plume of white smoke as it launches into the air. The missile accelerates rapidly, its trajectory carrying it toward the incoming Argentine aircraft. But Morales and his wingman Brennan have anticipated this moment. They've trained for it, they've studied the capabilities of the British missile systems, and they know exactly what to do. As the Sea Dart missile launches, Morales and Brennan descend even lower, their aircraft dropping to an altitude so dangerously low that they're practically skimming the wavetops. The radar operators aboard Coventry watch in frustration as the aircraft disappear from their screens once again, dropping below the radar horizon. The Sea Dart missile, following its programmed trajectory, continues on its course, but without a radar lock to guide it, it's essentially flying blind. Morales watches as the missile passes 500 meters to his right, its trajectory carrying it away from his aircraft. He can see the missile clearly, can see the smoke trail it's leaving behind, can see the moment when it realizes it has lost its target and begins to search for a new one. But by then, Morales is already committed to his attack run, his aircraft screaming toward HMS Broadsword at maximum speed. Aboard HMS Broadsword, Captain Mitchell is watching the radar screens as his crew frantically works to restart the Seawolf missile system. The system had crashed moments earlier when the radar had detected what it thought was a single aircraft, but was actually 2 aircraft flying in close formation. The radar had become confused, unable to process the conflicting data, and the guidance system had shut down as a safety measure. Now, with Argentine aircraft approaching, Mitchell's crew is in a race against time, trying to get the system back online before the attack reaches them. Come on," one of the operators mutters, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he works through the restart sequence. The screens are dark, unresponsive, showing nothing but the default startup screens. The seconds are ticking by, and with each passing moment, the Argentine aircraft are getting closer. Mitchell can feel the tension in the operations room, can feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. His ship's survival depends on getting that system back online in the next few seconds. Then, miraculously, the screens flicker to life. The radar system comes back online, and the operators immediately begin searching for targets. "We have contacts," one of them shouts. "Seawolf radar is active, acquiring targets now." The system locks onto Morales' aircraft, the targeting computer calculating the intercept course, the missile launcher beginning its rotation to align with the target. Mitchell feels a surge of hope. They might just make it through this after all, but then something goes catastrophically wrong. As the Seawolf launcher is rotating to engage Morales' aircraft, HMS Coventry, in its attempt to maneuver and engage all 4 Argentine aircraft, sails directly in front of the launcher. The broadsword Seawolf system, designed with safety interlocks to prevent friendly fire, immediately ceases its engagement sequence. The launcher stops rotating, the targeting computer disengages, and the missile system goes into standby mode. "God damn it! The Coventry is in the way!" Captain Mitchell shouts, his voice carrying the frustration and desperation of a man who sees victory slipping away. He immediately orders his helmsman to maneuver the ship, to get out of the way of his own missile system, but it's too late. The maneuver takes time, precious seconds that the broadsword simply doesn't have. The Argentine aircraft are now less than 2 nautical miles away and closing fast. This is the kind of moment that defines military history. when split-second decisions and tactical maneuvers determine the fate of entire ships and the lives of hundreds of sailors. If you're following this battle closely, you understand how close the British came to complete disaster. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think the British made the right tactical decisions, or should they have done something differently? Aboard HMS Coventry, Captain Richardson is now fully aware of the danger. He can see the Argentine aircraft approaching, can see them with his naked eye from the bridge of his ship. He orders all turrets to open fire, to engage the incoming aircraft with everything the ship has. The Coventry's main 4.5-inch gun begins to fire, its shells arcing out toward the approaching Skyhawks. The 20mm anti-aircraft guns join in, their rapid-fire rounds creating a wall of lead in the sky. Sailors all across the ship, armed with rifles and machine guns, begin to fire as well, adding their small arms fire to the defensive barrage. The sea around the Argentine aircraft churns and froths as shells and bullets strike the water, creating a deadly gauntlet that Morales and Brennan must fly through. But the Argentine pilots are committed now. There's no turning back, no abort option. They're going to complete their attack run, and they're going to do it regardless of the cost. Morales sees the enemy ship fill his entire field of vision. The Coventry is right there, massive and imposing, its deck bristling with weapon systems, its superstructure rising up like a fortress. Morales pulls the trigger on his aircraft's 20mm cannons, and a stream of rounds begins to pour out, stitching a line of impacts across the Coventry's deck and superstructure. He holds the trigger down, pouring fire into the ship, trying to suppress the defensive fire, trying to create an opening for his bomb run. Then Morales releases his payload. Two 250-kilogram bombs fall away from his aircraft, their trajectory carrying them directly toward the Coventry's hull. Unlike Castellano's bombs, which skipped across the water, Morales' bombs are heading directly for the ship, and they're going to hit. The first bomb strikes the Coventry's hull with a tremendous impact, punching through the outer plating and penetrating deep into the ship's interior. The second bomb follows milliseconds later, striking a different section of the hull and creating another massive hole. The impacts are so violent, so powerful, that the entire ship shudders from the force of the collisions. For a moment, nothing happens. The bombs have penetrated the hull, but they haven't detonated yet. The British sailors aboard the Coventry, those who have survived the initial impacts, look around in confusion and fear, wondering if they've been spared, wondering if the bombs are duds. But then, seconds drag on, and the moment of terrible anticipation stretches out like an eternity. Then the bombs detonate. Two massive explosions rock HMS Coventry, the force of the detonations sending shockwaves through the entire vessel. The first explosion occurs directly beneath the bridge, creating a massive hole in the side of the ship and destroying the computer room in an instant. The blast is so powerful that it destroys the operations room where Captain Richardson and his tactical team were working. The force of the explosion tearing through the compartment and killing everyone inside in an instant. The second explosion occurs in the forward engine room, the blast destroying the ship's propulsion systems and electrical systems in one catastrophic moment. The Coventry, which moments before had been a functioning warship, bristling with weapons and defenses, is now a crippled, burning hulk, listing heavily to one side as water pours into the massive holes created by the Argentine bombs. In the sky above the Coventry, Morales and Brennan see the smoke pouring from the ship, see the massive explosions that have torn through the vessel. They've done it. Against all odds, against the most advanced defensive systems the British Navy has to offer, they've successfully attacked and damaged a British warship. "Woo ha ha ha!" Morales shouts into the radio, his voice carrying the exultation of a man who has just accomplished something extraordinary. "Boom, dude!" Brennan adds, his voice equally triumphant. "Goal!" another voice shouts, using the Spanish word for goal, for victory. "Long live the nation!" Another pilot cries out, his voice carrying the weight of national pride and military accomplishment. The smoke that pours from HMS Coventry is thick and black, rising high into the South Atlantic sky, visible for miles across the open ocean. Inside the ship, chaos has erupted. The explosions have destroyed critical systems, have killed dozens of sailors in an instant, have transformed a functioning warship into a scene of absolute devastation. The corridors are filled with smoke so thick that visibility is reduced to mere feet. The screams of wounded sailors echo through the compartments, a sound that will haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. Captain Richardson, who had been in the operations room when the bombs detonated, regains consciousness slowly, his mind struggling to process what has happened. He's surrounded by smoke and destruction, the air thick with the acrid smell of burning metal and explosives. His ears are ringing from the force of the explosions, and for a moment he can't hear anything but that high-pitched whine. Then gradually, other sounds begin to penetrate his consciousness. The groaning of the ship's hull as it lists, the crackling of fires spreading through the compartments, the screams of his men. Richardson staggers to his feet, his body aching from the impact of the explosions. He's wounded, blood running down his face from a gash on his forehead, but he's alive. He looks around the operations room, and what he sees fills him with a sense of profound loss. The compartment is destroyed, the equipment shattered, the bodies of his officers and crew scattered across the deck. The tactical team that had been working with him moments before is gone, killed in an instant by the force of the explosions. Richardson realizes that the ship is listing, that water is pouring into the compartments below, that the Coventry is sinking. He attempts to use the intercom to communicate with the rest of the ship, to coordinate the evacuation, but the system is completely dead. The electrical systems have been destroyed, the communication network severed. He's isolated, cut off from the rest of the ship, unable to communicate with his crew. But Richardson is a professional, a man who has trained for this moment his entire career. He knows what he needs to do. He needs to get out of the operations room, needs to reach the deck, needs to coordinate the evacuation of his crew. He slowly works his way through the smoke-filled corridors, navigating by feel and memory, his hand trailing along the bulkheads to guide him through the darkness. The ship is groaning around him, the metal creaking and cracking as the hull begins to fail under the stress of the damage and the incoming water. The corridors are a maze of destruction. Debris is scattered everywhere, blocking passages, creating obstacles that Richardson must navigate around. He passes compartments that are completely engulfed in flames, the heat so intense that he can feel it from the corridor. He passes other compartments where the water is already pouring in, the sea claiming the ship one compartment at a time. And he passes the bodies of his crew, sailors who had been going about their duties moments before and are now gone. Their lives ended in an instant by the force of the explosions. After what feels like an eternity, but is probably only a few minutes, Richardson manages to find an exit and emerges onto the deck of the Coventry. The cool air of the South Atlantic hits him like a shock, and for a moment he simply stands there, breathing deeply, trying to process what has happened. The deck is a scene of controlled chaos, but it's not the chaos he expected. Instead of panic and disorder, he's met by an extremely professional evacuation. The British sailors, trained and drilled for exactly this scenario, are springing into action with a precision and professionalism that speaks to the quality of the Royal Navy's training and discipline. Men are moving through the smoke-filled compartments, rescuing their fellow sailors from the burning and flooding sections of the ship. Medical personnel are providing first aid to the wounded on the deck, treating burns and injuries with a calm efficiency that belies the horror of the situation. Other sailors are preparing the survival rafts, inflating them and positioning them along the side of the ship, Still others are helping their fellow sailors put on their survival gear, ensuring that everyone who can be saved will have the best possible chance of survival. Richardson feels a surge of pride as he watches his crew work. These are good men, professional men, men who have been trained to maintain their composure and their discipline even in the face of absolute disaster. They're not panicking. They're not abandoning ship in a disorderly rout. Instead, they're executing the evacuation procedures with a precision that would be impressive even in a training exercise. But Richardson also feels the deck shifting beneath his feet as the Coventry continues to list. The ship is sinking, and it's sinking faster now as more water pours into the damaged compartments. The list is becoming more pronounced, the angle of the deck becoming steeper. Richardson knows that they don't have much time. The ship will go under soon, and anyone still aboard when it does will go down with it. Richardson moves to the side of the ship and watches as his crew begins to abandon the vessel. The sailors are moving in an orderly fashion, climbing down the nets that have been rigged along the side of the ship, dropping into the survival rafts that are waiting below. The process is slow, methodical, designed to ensure that as many men as possible make it off the ship safely. But the list of the ship is making the process more difficult, the angle of the deck making it harder for the sailors to maintain their footing. Richardson is dazed and wounded, and the shock of what has happened is beginning to set in. He finds himself sitting down on the rapidly listing hull, his back against the superstructure, watching as his ship dies around him. He's done his duty. He's coordinated the evacuation as best he could, and now he's waiting for his turn to leave the ship. But there's a part of him that doesn't want to leave, a part of him that feels like abandoning the Coventry is a betrayal of the trust that his crew has placed in him. But duty calls, and Richardson knows that he needs to set an example for his crew. He needs to be the last man off the ship, needs to ensure that every sailor who can be saved has been saved. He watches as the last of his crew members climb down the nets and drop into the survival rafts. The deck is now nearly vertical, the ship listing so severely that it's almost on its side. The water is rising, the sea claiming the Coventry one section at a time. Finally, when all of his crew has been evacuated, when the last sailor has dropped into the survival rafts, Richardson makes his way to the edge of the ship. The deck is now so steeply angled that he has to crawl, using his hands and feet to maintain his grip on the metal plating. He reaches the edge of the hull and looks down at the survival raft waiting below. It's a long drop, and the water is churning with the debris of the ship and the bodies of the sailors who have already jumped. Richardson takes a deep breath, says a silent prayer and jumps. He plummets through the air, the wind rushing past him, and then he hits the water. The cold of the South Atlantic takes his breath away, the shock of the temperature nearly overwhelming his senses. But he's trained for this, and he forces himself to move, to swim toward the survival raft, to pull himself out of the water and into the relative safety of the raft. As Richardson sits in the survival raft, soaking wet and shivering from the cold, he watches as HMS Coventry finally succumbs to the damage and begins to sink. The ship, which had been a symbol of British naval power, which had been bristling with weapons and defences just minutes before, is now going down into the depths of the South Atlantic. The bow rises up into the air as the stern sinks, the ship's hull groaning and cracking as the pressure of the water tears it apart. And then, with a final terrible sound, the Coventry slips beneath the waves, disappearing into the darkness below. The survival rafts are scattered across the surface of the ocean, each one carrying a group of sailors who have managed to escape the sinking Coventry. The men are cold, wet, and traumatized, but they're alive. They huddle together in the rafts, trying to conserve body heat, trying to maintain their composure as they wait for rescue. The British Navy has already dispatched rescue helicopters and other ships to the area, and the sailors know that help is on the way. But in the meantime, They're alone on the vast expanse of the South Atlantic, surrounded by nothing but water and sky. HMS Broadsword, which had managed to avoid the worst of the Argentine attack, is now moving toward the survival rafts, its crew working frantically to rescue the survivors from the Coventry. The ship's boats are being lowered into the water, and sailors are being sent out to retrieve the men from the rafts. It's a dangerous operation. The sea is rough, and the cold is a constant threat. But the British sailors are determined to save as many of their comrades as possible. The rescue helicopters arrive within minutes, their rotors beating the air as they hover above the survival rafts. Rescue swimmers are being lowered on cables, dropping into the water to help the survivors, to provide medical assistance to those who are injured or suffering from hypothermia. The operation is a model of efficiency and professionalism, a testament to the training and dedication of the British military personnel involved. Over the course of the next few hours, 170 survivors are rescued from the water. 170 men who just hours before had been going about their duties aboard HMS Coventry are now safe, pulled from the cold waters of the South Atlantic and brought aboard the rescue ships. They're wrapped in blankets, given hot drinks, provided with medical attention for their injuries. Many of them are in shock, unable to fully process what has happened, unable to comprehend that their ship is gone, that their comrades are dead. But the rescue operation also reveals the terrible cost of the battle. 19 sailors from HMS Coventry have been killed in the attack. 19 men who had been alive just hours before, who had families waiting for them back in Britain, who had their entire lives ahead of them, are now gone. Their bodies are never recovered, lost in the depths of the South Atlantic, their final resting place, the cold, dark waters of the ocean. The loss weighs heavily on the survivors, on Captain Richardson, on the entire British naval force in the South Atlantic. The Coventry had been a modern, well-equipped warship, equipped with the latest defensive systems, crewed by professional sailors. And yet it had been sunk by 4 aging Argentine aircraft, flown by pilots who were flying machines that were already obsolete. It's a humbling reminder that in warfare, no matter how advanced your technology, no matter how well trained your personnel, victory is never guaranteed. Meanwhile, the Argentine pilots are returning to their base, their aircraft damaged but still flying, their ordnance expended but their mission accomplished. Morales and Brennan are the heroes of the moment, the pilots who have successfully attacked and damaged a British warship, who have struck a blow for Argentine pride and Argentine sovereignty. They land their aircraft, climb out of the cockpits, and are immediately surrounded by their fellow pilots and ground crew who are celebrating their success. But the celebration is tempered by the knowledge that the war is far from over. The sinking of the Coventry is a significant victory, but it's not a decisive one. The British still have overwhelming naval superiority, still have more ships, more aircraft, more resources. The Argentinians have won a battle, but they haven't won the war. And as the pilots debrief with their commanders, as they recount the details of their attack, they know that the British will be back, that there will be more battles, more opportunities for both sides to strike at each other. The question that hangs over everyone involved in this conflict is simple. What will happen next? Will the British continue their advance toward the Falkland Islands, or will they pause to reassess their strategy? Will the Argentinians launch more attacks, trying to capitalize on their success, or will they consolidate their position and prepare for the inevitable British counterattack? The answers to these questions will determine the course of the war, will determine whether Argentina maintains control of the Falkland Islands or whether the British reclaim them. The sinking of HMS Coventry sends shockwaves through the British military establishment. The loss of a modern warship, the deaths of 19 sailors, the damage to HMS Broadsword, all of these factors combine to create a moment of crisis for the British command. The naval commanders in the South Atlantic are forced to reassess their strategy, to reconsider their approach to the conflict, to think carefully about how to proceed in the face of Argentine air superiority. The British realize that their ships are vulnerable to Argentine air attacks, that the advanced radar systems and missile defenses that they had relied upon are not as effective as they had hoped. The Argentinians have demonstrated that with proper tactics, with low-level flying, with coordinated attacks, they can penetrate British defenses and inflict significant damage. This realization forces the British to change their tactics, to move their ships further away from the islands, to rely more heavily on their air superiority and their ground forces. For the Argentinians, the sinking of the Coventry is a moment of triumph, but it's also a moment of reckoning. They've demonstrated that they can hurt the British, that they can inflict casualties and damage, but they've also expended significant resources in doing so. The 4 aircraft that attacked the Coventry are now damaged, their ordnance expended, their pilots exhausted. The Argentinians don't have an unlimited supply of aircraft or pilots, and every loss, every expenditure of resources brings them closer to the point where they simply won't have the capability to continue fighting. The broader strategic situation in the Falkland Islands conflict is one of attrition and resource management. The British have the advantage in terms of overall military capability, in terms of naval power, in terms of air superiority. But the Argentinians have the advantage of fighting close to home, of having a shorter supply line, of having the motivation that comes from fighting for what they believe is their sovereign territory. The question is whether the Argentinians can inflict enough damage on the British, can kill enough British soldiers and sailors, can destroy enough British equipment to force the British to negotiate or to withdraw. The sinking of the Coventry is a significant blow to British morale, but it's not a decisive one. The British still have overwhelming advantages in terms of military capability, and they're determined to reclaim the Falkland Islands. The loss of the Coventry will not deter them from their objective. Instead, it will likely harden their resolve, will make them more determined to defeat the Argentinians and to reclaim the islands. For the Argentinians, the sinking of the Coventry is a moment of national pride, a moment when they can point to a significant military victory and say that they've hurt the enemy, that they've demonstrated their capability and their determination. But it's also a moment of realization that the war is far from over, that the British are not going to simply give up and go home, that there will be more battles, more casualties, more suffering before this conflict is resolved. The pilots who participated in the attack on the Coventry are celebrated as heroes in Argentina, their names and their accomplishments broadcast on the radio and in the newspapers. They've become symbols of Argentine resistance, symbols of the nation's determination to hold on to the Falkland Islands. But they also know, deep down, that their victory is temporary, that the British will be back, that there will be more opportunities for combat, more chances to strike at the enemy. The survivors of HMS Coventry are scattered across various British ships and facilities in the South Atlantic, each one processing the trauma of what they've experienced. Some of them are relatively unscathed, having been fortunate enough to be in compartments that were not directly affected by the explosions. Others are severely injured, suffering from burns, broken bones, and other injuries that will require extensive medical treatment. And all of them are traumatized, having witnessed the death of their comrades, having experienced the terror of a ship sinking beneath them, having come face to face with their own mortality. Captain Richardson is among the survivors, and he's struggling with the weight of command, with the knowledge that his decisions, or his lack of decisions, may have contributed to the loss of his ship and the deaths of his crew. He's replaying the events of the battle over and over in his mind, wondering if he could have done something differently, wondering if he could have prevented the attack, wondering if he could have saved more of his men. It's a burden that will stay with him for the rest of his life, a weight that he will carry with him always. The 19 sailors who died in the attack are mourned by their families back in Britain, by their fellow sailors, by the entire British military establishment. They're remembered as heroes, as men who died in service to their country, as men who made the ultimate sacrifice. But they're also remembered as individuals, as sons and brothers and husbands and fathers, as men who had dreams and aspirations, as men who had their entire lives ahead of them before they were cut short by the violence of war. The Argentine pilots who participated in the attack are also processing their experience, but in a very different way. They're celebrated as heroes, their names and their accomplishments broadcast throughout Argentina. They're given medals and commendations. They're interviewed by the media. They're held up as examples of Argentine courage and determination. But they also know that they've killed men, that they've destroyed a ship, that they've contributed to the suffering and the loss that is the inevitable consequence of war. Morales and Brennan, the pilots who delivered the fatal blow to the Coventry, are particularly celebrated. They're the men who sank a British warship, who struck a significant blow against the British military. But they're also men who are haunted by what they've done, who understand the weight of their actions, who know that the men they killed had families, had loved ones, had their entire lives ahead of them. The broader human cost of the Falkland Islands conflict is staggering. Hundreds of men on both sides will die before the conflict is resolved. Thousands more will be wounded, will suffer injuries that will affect them for the rest of their lives. Families will be torn apart, communities will be devastated, and the scars of the conflict will remain for generations. The sinking of the Coventry is just one chapter in a larger story of human suffering and loss, a story that will continue to unfold as the conflict progresses. The sinking of HMS Coventry becomes one of the most significant naval engagements of the Falkland Islands conflict, a moment that is studied and analyzed by military strategists and historians for decades to come. The battle demonstrates the vulnerability of modern warships to air attack, the importance of low-level flying tactics, the critical role that coordination and timing play in military operations. It's a lesson that will influence naval strategy and tactics for years to come, a lesson that will be taught in military academies and war colleges around the world. For the British, the loss of the Coventry is a painful reminder that no matter how advanced your technology, no matter how well-trained your personnel, you can still be defeated if your enemy is determined and willing to take risks. The British will adapt their tactics, will move their ships further away from the islands, will rely more heavily on their air superiority and their ground forces. But the loss of the Coventry will always be a part of British naval history, a reminder of the cost of war, a reminder of the sacrifice that was made by the sailors who died in the attack. For the Argentinians, the sinking of the Coventry is a moment of triumph, but it's also a moment of realization that the war is far from over, that the British are not going to simply give up and go home. The Argentinians will continue to fight, will continue to launch attacks against British forces, but they will ultimately be defeated. The British will reclaim the Falkland Islands, will restore British sovereignty over the territory, and the Argentinian military will be forced to withdraw. The pilots who participated in the attack on the Coventry will be remembered as heroes in Argentina, their names and their accomplishments celebrated in the annals of Argentine military history. But they will also be remembered as men who participated in a conflict that ultimately ended in defeat for their nation, a conflict that cost thousands of lives on both sides, a conflict that left deep scars on both the Argentine and British societies. The broader lesson of the Falkland Islands conflict, and of the sinking of HMS Coventry in particular, is that war is a complex and unpredictable phenomenon, that victory is never guaranteed, that the outcome of military conflicts is determined by a complex interplay of factors including technology, training, tactics, leadership, and luck. The sinking of the Coventry demonstrates that even the most advanced military technology can be defeated by determination, courage, and tactical innovation. It's a lesson that remains relevant today, a lesson that military strategists and historians continue to study and analyze. The survivors of the Coventry go on to live their lives, to return to their families, to process the trauma of what they've experienced. Some of them will continue their military careers, will serve in the British Navy for many more years. Others will leave the military, will seek out civilian careers, will try to put the horrors of war behind them. But all of them will carry the memory of the Coventry with them for the rest of their lives, will remember the comrades they lost, will remember the moment when their ship was struck by Argentine bombs and began to sink into the depths of the South Atlantic. The story of HMS Coventry and the attack that sank her is a story of courage and sacrifice, a story of the human cost of war, a story of the complex and often tragic consequences of military conflict. It's a story that deserves to be remembered, a story that deserves to be studied and analyzed, a story that deserves to be told and retold so that future generations can understand the true cost of war, can appreciate the sacrifice that was made by the men who fought in the Falkland Islands conflict, and can work toward a world where such conflicts are resolved through negotiation and diplomacy rather than through violence and bloodshed. The legacy of the Coventry is one of remembrance and reflection, a legacy that honors the memory of the 19 sailors who died in the attack, a legacy that celebrates the courage and professionalism of the British sailors who survived the attack and who participated in the evacuation, a legacy that reminds us all of the importance of peace, of the value of human life, and of the terrible cost of war. The battle for HMS Coventry represents a pivotal moment in the Falkland Islands conflict, a moment when the course of the war hung in the balance, a moment when the decisions made by military commanders and the actions taken by individual soldiers and sailors determined the outcome of events. The sinking of the Coventry is a testament to the courage of the Argentine pilots who flew the attack, to the professionalism of the British sailors who fought to defend their ship, and to the sacrifice of the 19 men who gave their lives in the battle. The story of the Coventry is a story that transcends the specific conflict in which it occurred, a story that speaks to the universal human experiences of courage, sacrifice, loss, and resilience. It's a story that reminds us of the importance of remembering those who have fallen in service to their countries, of honoring the sacrifice that was made, and of working toward a world where such sacrifices are no longer necessary. As we reflect on the events of May 25, 1982, as we remember the men who fought and died in the battle for the Falkland Islands, we are reminded of the true cost of war, of the importance of peace, and of the value of human life. The legacy of HMS Coventry lives on, in the memories of those who survived the attack, in the hearts of the families of those who died, and in the annals of military history where it will continue to be studied and remembered for generations to come.